I've been making YouTube content for coming up to 6 years in November, and 2 years ago I decided to take the rather scary leap into making this my full-time job. In that time there's obviously been some ups and downs, but what's kept me going has been the passion I have for the tabletop hobby, my love of creating content, and the amazing community that has grown up around this channel. Lately, however, I've been in a bit of a creative slump and I couldn't quite put my finger on what was causing it. Until now, that is. I've been struggling to come up with video topics and ideas for interesting content, and this in turn has meant I've put extra pressure on myself to try and come up with something. I feel like I'm letting down my Patreons who support me, and some of them are understandably drifting away, and with them, the money I make each month begins to drop. As I continue to struggle for ideas, I'm making less videos, and so my overall views are down, and with that, the ad revenue I make from those views drops too. This just compounds the reduction in money I make each month, which again adds pressure on me to come up with new content ideas that will drive some much needed views and support again. I just couldn't quite put my finger on what was driving this YouTube equivalent of writer's block. That is until I chatted with Discourse Miniatures on my Monday night live stream, and then I watched her video the next day on how YouTubers are killing wargaming. Then I knew exactly what it was. It was Games Workshop. I invite you to grab a drink, sit back, relax, and allow me to explain. When I started making video content almost 6 years ago now, my first ever video was on the Walking Dead miniatures game by Mantic Games. I never thought back then it would lead me to be here now, working for myself, creating videos about tabletop games. However, over time, I grew to absolutely love making content. I loved interacting with the folks who watched it and building a community of gamers, painters, and general hobbyists who liked the same things that I liked. Now, I'm not someone who had the usual route into tabletop gaming. I didn't collect Games Workshop minis as a kid, as I grew up not that well off. My dad was a coal miner working all hours of the day and night down the mine, and my mum stayed at home and looked after the family. When I was about 9 years old, normally that age where kids are starting to find Warhammer and other hobbies, he, like many others in our local community, went on strike for 12 months, which meant we literally had nothing for a long time. Now, at the time, I never really felt poor, as all of my friends' fathers were all on strike too, so no one around me had money. But it also meant that no one was into Warhammer either. We just played football and ran around the streets and never even considered buying minis or paints. Now, I never played my first real tabletop game until my early 30s, and after one horrendous demo game of 40k, where my opponent thought the best way to teach me and get me interested was to smash me off the table in turn 2, I decided Warhammer wasn't for me. But attending that local club opened my eyes to the fact that Games Workshop weren't the only game available. I went home and looked online for miniature war games rather than Warhammer and found Malifaux, War Machine, and Kings of War, and my love of the wider tabletop hobby was born. Now, over the years, I've dabbled with Games Workshop games. I'd been making videos for about 4 months, and I was at the heady heights of 250 subscribers, and I had my sights set on growing. Up until this point, I'd only made videos about the Walking Dead miniatures game, so I looked to see what else took my fancy and if there were any local groups around. This is where I found Age of Sigmar, and I started to make videos about my journey into AOS. I began to build and paint my newly bought Beastclaw Raiders army and began learning how to play the game. It was at this point I started to see some growth. I very quickly hit 500 subscribers, and I was talking about Games Workshop games in my videos. I'd seen the channels that were making content on Warhammer products were getting way more views than I was for my Walking Dead stuff, and I knew if I wanted to grow, I needed to cover the more popular stuff. But there was one big problem. I didn't really like the popular stuff. Age of Sigmar was a game that I'd had fun with the lads I was playing with, but I couldn't say I was having fun with the game itself. Fast forward a little further and I'd picked up Necromunda, Underworld, Shadespire, Kill Team, and 40k 8th edition. Each time I'd make a bunch of content about them and the views would come rolling in. The channel would grow and I'd quickly realise that GW games just weren't for me. I just wasn't enjoying them. The minis were great, but the rules, to me anyway, just weren't that fun to play, and I couldn't get excited to talk about them in my content, so I'd end up moving on to something else. Now the views at this stage weren't so important to me, and it was more about having fun. Making content was part of my hobby, and being around a community of like-minded folks who liked playing lots of different games was a big part of the attraction to keep going. So I made videos about what I was enjoying at the time, and the channel grew slowly but steadily. January 2019, and I decided I was going to take the channel a little more seriously, and I was going to be more consistent with my content. By this point, I was well aware that any video I made with a Games Workshop logo in the thumbnail or somewhere in the title would get more views and generate more subscribers. However, I really wanted to stay true to my passion and only make videos about the things I was truly enjoying myself. By February 2019, I'd hit 4,000 subscribers, and I was starting to pull away from the other channels that were covering similar non-Warhammer related stuff, who seemed to be stuck around that maybe 1,000 to 2,000 subscriber mark. I was way behind the bigger 40k channels, but comparing myself to other channels not covering the big stuff was a more realistic benchmark. I did wonder why there were no bigger channels that only really covered non-GW stuff, but I just kept on going. I was having fun. I was really trying to focus on the wider tabletop hobby and not just on one particular game. And whilst this meant that the audience for each individual video might be lower, as I covered many different systems and topics, the audience I could try to connect with was much bigger than just one less popular game. And then when GW talked about some big news, I'd give my thoughts on it, and with it I'd see a boost in views. It was a balancing act that was working for me at the time. July 2019, Games Workshop released Warcry, and I absolutely loved it. It was simple, straightforward rules, and I still to this day feel that Warcry is the best game GW have ever made. I started making videos about it, and my channel took a huge leap forward. I made a video about building the terrain that very quickly became the most popular video on my channel, and the subscriber numbers began to climb. I kept making Warcry videos, and that momentum just kept going. I could really see what it was like to be a more popular channel covering the more popular games. I was still enjoying playing lots of other stuff too, but for a while Warcry became my main game. I eventually reached a point where there just wasn't that much more to say about Warcry. The releases, as they do for most non-GW mainline games, started to dry up, and other than having fun playing, there wasn't much left to say, so I went back to covering the wider range of games, but all the while knowing that putting a GW spin on something would keep that momentum going. Things like I did a painting video for Ossiarch Bone Reapers when they first launched. I wasn't playing AOS, but I knew that they were a popular new release, and that video did very well. I included Games Workshop products in thumbnails. I compared the games I was playing to GW games, and I tried my best to drive views and growth the best way I knew how. By the end of 2019, I'd made up my mind that I was going to leave my job and go full-time as a content creator. I wasn't making much money, but through a combination of Patreon support, ad revenue, affiliate marketing, and selling merchandise, I was making just enough to be able to make the leap if we tightened up on a few things at home. I could do something that I was absolutely passionate about, and I could leave a job that I absolutely hated and be at home more often with my family. In March of 2020, that became a reality when I left my old job and walked straight into a global pandemic a week later. I tried to make the best of the situation. I had to accept that I now had a 3-year-old at home all day with me every day whilst I'm trying to make content. My wife, who's now our only real source of serious income and keeping a roof over our heads, had meetings online at home every day, so I needed to try and balance in childcare during the day and making content at night. I kept grinding away and making videos about what I'm passionate about, all the while feeling more and more dirty about throwing in those GW references just to try and keep the wheels from falling off. January 2021, and Games Workshop announced Curse City. I was super excited for it. I loved Silver Tower. I loved the AOS adjacent setting with vampires and witch hunters, and I was looking forward to picking it up. I was making all the regular rumours content, why I'm excited for it type stuff, and the channel was going great guns. I managed to buy my copy, built it all up, played my first games, and I was so disappointed. It was such a letdown. It was nothing like I'd expected from the marketing and the previews. It was at this point that I kind of drew a line in the sand and came to the realization that GW games just really aren't for me. And I should know by now not to keep spending what little money I had on the ever-increasing, more expensive sets. I much preferred playing games from Mantic, especially with their more straightforward rule sets, and so I moved my focus away from anything GW released and doubled down on only covering non-GW stuff. Since then, I've made videos about Kings of War Armada, Dystopian Wars, Dreadball, Moonstone, Malifaux, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Overdrive, Dead Zone, Wild West Exodus, Firefight, and God Tier, to name but a few. And do you know what they all have in common? All of that content, do you know what it has in common? Way less views. Like, much less. I recorded an interview with Warren from On Tabletop, and I needed to try and make a title and a thumbnail for the video, so I called out a reference to comments he made in the chat we had about their dealings with GW, and that video blew up. It was both great to see and at the same time absolutely soul-destroying, knowing exactly why it had happened. It was like I knew that no matter how good or how bad my content was, the thing driving it was outside of my control. I've not referenced the GW product in a main video since Curse City back in April 2021, and my channel is really feeling the pain because of it. My views are down, my reach is down as YouTube is not sharing my videos, and it's all because of GW, or more importantly, the lack of GW content. The chat I had with Discourse this week and her video made me realise why I'm in this slump. I'm here because it's soul-sapping to work hard for days on a video only for YouTube to bury it away because it is not GW. I'm in this slump because I know that any video I make right now will do poorly if it's not about Games Workshop, and each subsequent video will perform worse and worse as YouTube shares it with less and less people. This video is even an attempt to prove to you that more people will watch this because of the title and the thumbnail. I mean, you're here, watching it, aren't you? And ask yourself, have you watched anything else I've made recently? I'm in that vicious cycle of second-guessing all of my ideas, thinking, well, I know that that idea won't do very well, so why bother making a video out of it? And then I end up making nothing. Creativity is something that needs to keep being fed, or it dries up, and that's how I've been feeling lately. However, this is now my business. This is my livelihood, and I need to be serious about things, and I absolutely know the easy answer is staring me right in the face. Just go and make Warhammer videos. But this is a huge problem. I'm not passionate about GW products. I'm passionate about games like Firefight and Dead Zone, and I want to talk about the wider hobby and not just about the big guys. This huge problem is exactly what this video is about. This huge problem is also what Discourse Miniatures video was about. Games Workshop have flooded the market with products so it's all you see on your friendly local game store shelves, and they've gotten YouTube creators to do the exact same thing to the YouTube algorithm. Why do you think they send out so many copies of the new releases to channels? On pre-order day, it absolutely dominates your feed. Look at Horus Heresy a few weeks ago, or Contrast Paints right now. You can't move for the stuff. Soon it'll be another Kill Team box, and then the new Warcry release, and then not too far away 10th edition 40k, and then the Old World. It's never ending, like a relentless GW avalanche rolling towards you, blocking out everything else, filling up your YouTube suggested feed because it's only about the views. I want to be able to make the hobby inclusive and accessible to everyone. I want to be a positive voice in the tabletop community, and I want to show folks that there's more games out there than just Games Workshop. There is more than one flavour of ice cream. Just try some others and you might like them. The dominance of Games Workshop and YouTubers' reliance on that popularity makes it so hard to swim against the tide. Those channels rely on paid advertising, and those advertisers expect views. And guess what drives views? Smaller games companies really need to start working hard with influencers and YouTubers, as pretty soon, if it keeps going this way, there will only be channels that cover Warhammer. If you think it's fun taking 3 or 4 days making a video only to see it at the bottom of the last 10 videos list, you'd be very wrong. This is why there's no bigger channels covering non-GW games on any real frequency. It's because they give up through lack of growth before they ever get big enough, or they move their focus and chase the Warhammer train with maybe a few lesser known games. But look at the disparity in views between their Warhammer and their non-Warhammer content, and you'll soon see why this is. My slump is self-induced, I know this, but it's been brought on by the relentless dark cloud of Games Workshop hanging over me, where I know all of my problems can disappear if I just buy a Kill Team box, or I go paint a 40k night. I found myself browsing the GW site looking to see if there's anything that interests me enough to make content with just to get the ball rolling again. Well, you know what? I'm not going to. I'm going to keep on making videos about the things I'm passionate about, and if that means that this channel dies over time, then it means my dream is over, but I'm going to do it on my terms, with my principles, and doing it for the reason that I started on this journey in the first place. Because I love what I do, and I do it about what I love.